When building out your retirement plan, there exists a silent killer: inflation. Today, we're quickly going to talk about what inflation is, why it's the silent killer, and what you can do to protect yourself when building out your retirement plan. Hey everyone, I'm Marc Sabourin, co-founder of TransCanada Wealth Management, and I'm here to help you tax efficiently plan for your retirement. All right, so let's dig into it. Inflation refers to the gradual increase in the cost of a product or service. The Bank of Canada's target for inflation is 2%. So in their eyes, a product that costs $100 today should be worth $102 next year. If we take a look at inflation over the last few years, we can see that the Bank of Canada was on track for its 2% target up until 2021. At that point, as we can see on the graph, there is a large spike, with inflation going over 8% by mid-2022. I'm sure we can all agree that this is something that we felt over the last couple of years. But let's take a step back and look at inflation over the last 25 years. It's been pretty consistent between 0 and 4%, except for the last 2 years. Now, if inflation remains high, this is where it can become the silent killer and have a devastating impact on your retirement plan. So how do we account for inflation when building out a retirement plan? Well, first and foremost, we can't forget about it. If you're planning a long retirement, then you definitely need to factor in inflation. If you're planning to spend, let's say, $7,000 per month in retirement, you're going to need to be able to spend a lot more than that in 10 years to have the same purchasing power as today. If you build out a plan with a certified financial planner, then their projections for inflation are going to be based on the recommendations of the FP Canada Standards Council. For 2023, a certified financial planner must use at minimum a 2.1 rate of inflation when building out a plan. As for how FP Canada comes up with this number, they offer the following guidelines. So let's take a look at a real-life example to see how you can account for inflation when building out a plan. So in this case, we have Mr. and Mrs. Inflation, and we're going to skip through all their financial details, but their retirement plan is currently at 105% funded, and this is based on using an inflation rate of 2.1%. They wanted to be able to spend $6,500 per month in retirement up to age 90. Now, based on the assets that they had accumulated, they were on track to do so while leaving themselves with a 2-year retirement cushion. When factoring in their home, their estate after tax would be valued at $1.6 million. So it looks like Mr. and Mrs. Inflation have nothing to worry about, but what if inflation is actually going to be higher than what we expect? After all, there is no guarantee that the Bank of Canada will hit its 2% target. If inflation is even 1% higher than expected throughout their retirement, their outlook looks completely different. Well, how different? Their plan goes from being 105% funded down to 78% funded. That's a decrease of 27%. We can see that due to inflation, they're having to draw on their retirement portfolio more aggressively in retirement. This leads them to having to use their home equity to maintain their lifestyle. This is why a retirement plan isn't something you build out once and follow for the rest of your retirement. You should be updating your plan regularly, because as soon as you change an assumption or an input, the outlook of the plan can change dramatically. Now let's compare the effects of inflation versus portfolio performance. I find that retirees are more concerned with how their portfolio is performed, but as we're about to see, inflation can have a much more devastating impact on their retirement. Let's go back to Mr. and Mrs. Inflation's plan, and I'll show you why. So as we saw, their plan was 105% funded based on a 2.1% inflation rate. As soon as we increased inflation by 1%, their plan went down to 78% funded. Now let's say that we go back to a 2.1% inflation rate, so their plan is now 105% funded, but instead we reduced their portfolio's performance by 1% in the plan. In this scenario, their plan goes from being 105% funded down to 91%. Not great, but it's nothing compared to the 27% drop due to the increase of inflation. So when building out your retirement plan, make sure to account for inflation and make sure to regularly update your plan as well. If you're looking for more retirement tips, check out our 20 retirement tip guide in the description below. Hit that subscribe button and we'll see you next time.